I'm going to get our hearing started for our nominee to Associate Justice of the Probate and Family Court, Bernadette Stark. So I'll be calling this meeting to order at 1:35. And I'm sure my fellow counselors who are trickling back in from lunch will join us as we go. So let me start off by saying congratulations on being nominated. I'm very happy to be chairing your hearing and representing Western Mass for what I consider a stellar nominee. Why don't we start by you introducing the people you brought with you today?
Absolutely. Today with me is my partner, Kate, my mother, Griselle, my aunt, Lucy, my cousin, Marisol, my former law partner, Raymond Dinsmore, one of my witnesses, my second witness, attorney Corey Carvalho, and my former student and friend, Cheyenne.
Welcome. Thank you all so much for coming out today and look forward to hearing from your witnesses shortly. So like I said, I am Tara Jacobs. I represent District 8. I'll introduce those of us who are present and I'll introduce the others as they come through. But we have our Honorable Councillor Devaney, Councillor Duff, and Councillor DiPaolo here today. And I will start off by reading into the record your nomination letter from the governor, December 8th, 2023, to the Executive Council. Dear councillors, I'm pleased to nominate Bernadette Stark to the position of Associate Justice of the Probate and Family Court. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I am enclosing the resume of the nominee for your convenience. Sincerely, Maura T. Healy. So I'm going to start with your first witness and ask you to come. You can stand, you can sit, but right next to Attorney Stark, this is Attorney Raymond Dinsmore, former law partner. We have a few more cycling in. Before you get started, I'll introduce them when they come on. We have Councillor Kennedy joining us and Councillor Ionella joining us now. Welcome, gentlemen. Whenever you're ready,
right.
Free.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Jacobs and members of this council. My name is Raymond Dinsmore, and I'm attorney and partner at the law firm of Haber, McKenna, and Dinsmore, which is an employee rights law firm in Massachusetts and Connecticut. I'm truly honored to be here today to speak in favor of the governor's appointment of Bernadette Stark as a justice of the Probate and Family Court. I've known Bernie now for over 20 years. We first met at Western Mass Legal Services in Northampton, which is now known as Community Legal Aid. Meeting and getting to know Bernie was, I consider, one of the luckiest acquaintances that I've ever made. And it was also an unlikely one, given that we met from very different trajectories in life and very different backgrounds. Bernadette grew up from a working class military family in Brooklyn, New York. Through her hard work and her talents, she was able to claw her way up through college into law school and ended up securing one of the most coveted associate positions in New England doing corporate law. After giving corporate law a fair shot, she realized that that her passions lay in representing the interests of ordinary people in their ordinary problems, which led her to apply for a position with Western Mass Legal Service representing families and survivors of domestic abuse. Bernie was already something of a big shot at the time that I met her. She was known by her colleagues to be competitive and fearless in the courtroom and not afraid to stand up to much more experienced opposing counsel. Bonded over our mutual love of baseball and became friends and learned that we shared very similar values and had very similar things that we wanted to do with our lives. And so in spite of the fact that I'm sorry to report Bernie is a lifelong New York Yankees fan, we decided to from Brooklyn, New York. In spite of that, we decided to join forces and open up a law practice together which was ultimately named Dinsmore Stark Attorneys at Law. I truly don't think that I would have had the nerve to take that step in my career at 1 year out of law school if I didn't have Bernie alongside me for the journey. Together, we built a successful law practice and worked alongside one another for over a decade. In 2019, we ended our partnership when Bernie had the opportunity to become the Director of Student Legal Services at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I'm happy to have remained in her orbit, serving on the board for the Student Legal Services Office. Having known Bernadette for so long and in so many different capacities and through so many different challenges, I hope you will trust me when I tell you that I'm in a unique position to speak confidently about her character and about her qualifications for appointment as a judge. But today I'd like to talk about more than just her qualifications, which I hope would be evident on their own, but to talk about why she will be a truly exceptional judge. Of all the different categories of judges that we have in the Commonwealth, I have to believe that serving as a judge of the Probate and Family Court would be the hardest. It's in part because you are tasked with sorting out and making sense the best you can of seemingly intractable problems of the most personal variety. Marriages that are falling apart, fights over custody, child abuse, domestic violence. And on top of all of that, you're routinely dealing with people who don't have lawyers or can't afford lawyers, and all the while their own personal lives are falling to pieces. You have to be intelligent, you have to be wise, you have to be kind, but you have to be tough, you have to be creative, you need to be consistent, you need to be attentive, thoughtful, and hardworking. Not only this, but you need to possess these qualities in an appropriate balance. You need to have empathy for people, but not empathy for people who are suffering without being illogical about it. You need to have good intuition about people and their motives while remaining open to new information. You need to be flexible and creative while still respecting the rule of law. You need to be kind, but you also have to be tough. And you need to be tough, but without being a bully on the bench. It's a high wire balancing act, and you have to perform it every day you put on the road, which also on top of it all means you need to be resilient. It's a rare thing, I think, to encounter people that possess various combinations of these qualities. And it's truly an exceptional thing to encounter somebody who has all of these qualities and somebody who possesses them in the appropriate balances. And I truly believe that Bernadette Stark is one of those truly exceptional people. I say this because I spent years working alongside her and observing her deal with the most difficult family law cases, and sometimes with the most difficult people. Honestly, it's a practice that probably would have burned me out in about 6 months, but Bernie did it all with grace and with humor and patience, without ever losing control and without ever giving up on people. The same qualities that made Bernie a great lawyer would also make her a great judge. I wholeheartedly recommend her nomination, and I thank the council for your consideration.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? Henry?
Your practice is in Springfield?
It is.
And do you do primarily probate court? I'm 2 minutes late, so.
Sure, yeah. So I'm primarily do employee rights and class action wage and hour work.
Okay. Well, have you spent any time in probate court at all?
I've spent some time in probate court. I've spent a lot of time in the juvenile court, which has some kind of functional overlap.
Some overlap, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your testimony. I think I've read through this nominee's material. I've spoken to her. I think she's a great candidate. I got to tell you, when she first got nominated, I got a call from Councilor Jacobs about what a great nominee she was. She's a huge, huge supporter of her, and that means a lot to me as well. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councilor Ranella.
Thank you very much. Now, you and the nominee were affiliated in the same law firm for a number of years.
We were.
To me, obviously, she has a great educational background. I appreciate that. But what is important to me is someone's character, someone's temperament. Give me a sense of demeanor. Give me a sense if you could address those issues, those qualities, I should say.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I think more than just about anybody else I know, and certainly more than myself, Bernadette is self-possessed in a way that is far superior to most lawyers that I personally deal with, that I've personally worked with, and who I have opposing me in in my own day-to-day practice. The thing that makes that remarkable is I think the intense stress and high potential for acrimony that is endemic to family law in particular. You're dealing with clients whose, like, as I said, their lives are falling apart. They're sometimes trying to inflict damage on one another using their lawyers as proxies. And it just takes a really special type of person to maintain control, help to, provide a good example for the client, demonstrate the level-headedness that is needed to make sure the parties are able to get together and work together. And if they can, then just do the best job that they can on their behalf in court. It's a pressure cooker, and Bernie seems to handle it with ease.
To be a judge in the probate court, you have to have a lot of patience. I mean, just because I think of the probate court, you better have patience. You've worked with her for a number of years. Does she have a temper?
The only time I've ever seen her get angry is when the Red Sox came back from a 3-0 deficit I'm kidding. She even kept her composure then. But yeah, I've never seen her lose her temper, and I'm not being, not exaggerating. I mean, tempers can run high. You get worked up in a case, and people can make you angry. But in terms of losing control, I've never once seen her lose control, either in the course of representing clients, in the course of her advocacy, in the course of just running a business with, the day-to-day challenges that come up in running a law practice. It hasn't happened, and I've not seen it.
Yes. That's hard to believe. The reason I say that is my good friend, Bob Judenholz on the council, and I talk to him all the time. He always used to ask that question. He withdrew from the council, resigned, I should say. And it's amazing. Everyone sits in that chair. Never have a temper. Never have a temper. It's not believable. That's like saying if I asked everyone in this room here, does anyone have a temper? No. So,
Yes.
so that's the question that he asked. We always used to talk about. Who's becomes the judge? That's pretty amazing. Not one judge. Well, I was there 10 years. Pretty unique that not one judge has a temper. That's pretty good.
Well, I think the question I think I was trying to answer was whether she had ever lost her control, control of her temper. She's gotten mad.
I'm here for one baby. I don't have any questions. The Counselor Jacobs, saying I got the same thing that she did with Kennedy. She called me right up, big supporter of yours. And when your name comes before the council, you can count on my full support. Thank you very much.
Oh, Councilor Devaney has a question.
Can you tell us an instance that really impressed you about this nominee when she was with the client?
Yeah. I remember that she had one particular client. It was a father in a custody issue. Just an extremely nice, well-meaning person, but one who just needed a lot more attention and hand-holding than your typical client. And somebody who would call every day and check in, double check everything by email. And, just really nervous, wanting to do the right thing for his kid, not wanting to make any mistakes in the proceeding, but doing so from kind of this position of hypervigilance. And I just remember the incredible amount of patience that our offices were right next door, so I heard her and saw her interact with this particular client a lot. And just the patience that she had with this particular client never made him feel silly for asking the questions. You know, made sure that his answers were, or his questions were fully answered the time he left her office. And, you know, I just remember thinking that you know, she was patient in a way that sometimes most of us fall short of, and that really impressed me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you so much for your testimony, appreciate it. I'll call up our next witness, who is attorney Corey Cavallo. You can sit, you can stand, whatever makes you happy and comfortable.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Jacobs and members of the Governor's Council. It is an honor to be here today to speak in support of the nomination of Attorney Bernadette Stark for appointment as an Associate Justice in the Probate and Family Court. I wish to extend my sincere gratitude to the members of this council for your service and dedication in vetting justices for the courts of our Commonwealth. My name is Corey Cavallo. I have practiced law in Massachusetts for 15 years, and I have known Attorney Stark my entire career. She has been a mentor, a trusted colleague, and a dear friend. Most of my experience has been in the probate and family court, and I have found my career to be incredibly challenging and equally rewarding. Someone would ask me when I was in law school, what type of law do you want to practice? My answer was always the same: anything but family law. At least that was my response until I met Attorney Stark in my final year of law school. We met in 2008 when we both worked at the Student Legal Services office at UMass Amherst. She was a staff attorney there and graciously agreed to mentor me in the portfolio of practice areas that she handled, including her specialty of family law. She was incredibly supportive, collaborative, and a wonderful supervisor. She created genuine learning opportunities to help me develop to my fullest potential. She promised to change my mind about family law. Attorney Stark showed me the positive impact that attorneys can make in the lives of children and families. I witnessed firsthand how Attorney Stark's advocacy guided her clients away from potential tragedy and uncertainty toward stability, security, hope, and healing. Her actions consistently demonstrated to me that compassion and empathy have a rightful place in the practice of law, especially in the family court. Her enthusiasm and sincere belief in the law's power to be a force of good in the lives of families was contagious. And as I began my legal career, it was clear to me that Attorney Stark's approach to the practice of law was something to emulate. She is incredibly diligent and hardworking. She is knowledgeable of the law and meticulously studies it. Her writing is incredibly thorough, thoughtful, and compelling. She is a zealous advocate and a skillful negotiator. She is well prepared for every court hearing, every negotiation, every meeting. And no matter a client's financial circumstance, Attorney Stark provides the utmost professional and duteous representation. She is a consummate professional who carries a deep sense of integrity and ethical responsibility. Needless to say, Attorney Stark did change my mind about family law. 6 weeks after I was sworn in as an attorney in Massachusetts, she and I co-counseled our first trial together in a family law case. And in the 15 years since, we have co-counseled dozens of family law cases together and at least half a dozen trials. And I can assure this council, her dedication to the families of the Commonwealth has not changed since 2008. She approaches each case with humility and humanity. She searches beyond the legal complexities to the human stories beneath, to understand the dynamics that underpin family conflict. She treats every individual in the courtroom with respect, understanding that each person, regardless of their background or circumstance, deserves fair and just treatment. I would venture that at least half of the cases that Attorney Stark and I have worked on together were performed pro bono. It has been a privilege to have worked closely with Attorney Stark all of these years. I've seen her mentorship continue with attorneys on her staff today and with law and undergraduate students who aspire to join the legal profession. She seeks out students from diverse backgrounds and identities who are underrepresented in the legal community to mentor. creating a pipeline of individuals interested in the legal profession who possess unique perspectives, experiences, and voices. She understands that for there to be diversity in our courtrooms, there must be diversity in our law classrooms and our legal incubators. Attorney Stark's commitment to legal education extends to her role as an adjunct professor, where her courses focus on negotiations and conflict resolution. She's a strong supporter of the local bar association and serves on the executive committee in Hampshire County. As a Massachusetts Bar Foundation Fellow, she serves on the foundation's Grant Advisory Committee, which allocates thousands of dollars to civil justice organizations throughout Western Massachusetts. Her contributions to the betterment of the legal profession cannot be overstated. It is nearly impossible to summarize all of the attributes that will make Attorney Stark an excellent probate and family court judge. It is equally impossible to summarize the incredible person that Bernie is. She is thoughtful, kind, and selfless. She is honest, trustworthy, and dependable. She is humble, competent, and competitive, but always polite and respectful. But to summarize and conclude, I will share one example of a case that I believe that captures the remarkable advocate and person that Attorney Stark is. 7 years after a biological mother placed her child in the care of her uncle and his wife, the mother reappeared at the relative's home unannounced with the police and demanded the child be returned to her and relocated to Florida. Panicked, the child's aunt, the only mother this child had ever known, looked to the courts for help and filed for a guardianship of the child. She could not afford an attorney, and she did not speak English. And she would need to prove her case by clear and convincing evidence. The odds were stacked against her and against this child. Fortunately, someone put the aunt in touch with Attorney Bernadette Stark, who was moved to intervene. She agreed to represent the aunt pro bono. She dedicated dozens, if not 100 or more hours to the case, and she was incredibly resourceful. She recruited another attorney to work on the case, also pro bono. Then, knowing her client could not afford to depose the biological mother, Attorney Stark persuaded a court reporter company to donate their time, their office, their stenographer, and a court transcript. She secured expert testimony, again at no cost. When faced with circumstances that presented as limiting, Attorney Stark found resources. She fashioned hope where there had been none. In the end, after 3 days of trial, Attorney Stark's client prevailed. Justice prevailed for that child. This is the approach, the type of dedication, and the ability to think through each case based on its specific facts that Attorney Stark will bring to the bench. Although her efforts in this case were extraordinary, it was not out of the ordinary for her. Dedication to this profession and to the best interest of every child and every family that appears before the probate and family court is unmatched. She possesses the intellect, emotional intelligence, and temperament to not only be a successful jurist in the opinion of the legal community, but most importantly, to be seen by the public and the community she will serve as a thoughtful, caring, and fair judge. She is prepared to take on the immense responsibility of the bench, and I know she will do so with grace, kindness, and compassion. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
I was going to ask you if you could talk about a case that she had that you observed and you just told us. So there goes my question. What do you think is her greatest attribute that she's bringing to the bench?
She's incredibly caring, and it feeds into everything she does. She cares so deeply about the law and the integrity of the law, about her clients, about her reputation, about how the law is perceived by others. She is an incredible friend, a very caring and supportive of her friends and family, many of whom are here today.
Was there a case that's in your mind that you worked with, a nominee that you lost and was really critical?
In the probate and family court, it's often to find winners and losers. It's a cases often are about compromise. What I find so remarkable about Attorney Stark is in most of the cases, if not all of the cases, her final settlement offer would often match the final judgment we got. And I just think that's her ability to understand the case that's in front of her, to make the best and most fair offer she can. And then oftentimes the court agrees and will tend to give her a judgment, as I said, which matches her last settlement offer.
But the ones that you've lost, she's lost.
I guess I would speak to the first case I mentioned that she and I co-counseled, where we represented a single father who had custody of his 2 children and was seeking child support. And that was a difficult trial. We did not receive the judgment we were hoping for. And Bernie's first instinct was, we do have a court of appeals.
I was just gonna say that, yeah.
So I think she understands that not every case is going to be successful, however the parties define that. But she is a fierce advocate, and that is the case I mentioned that helped spur my legal career.
Thank you. Your testimony was valuable, which would be hard. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for this witness?
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much for offering that testimony. I'm going to close this portion of the hearing and ask, do we have anyone else here today to speak in support of this nominee? Okay, seeing none. Do we have anyone here in opposition to today's nominee? Again, seeing none, so I'll close that portion of the hearing. At this point, I would like to offer the nominee the opportunity to share a personal statement.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Jacobs. And thank you all so much for hosting my hearing today, and to all of you for your time and consideration of my nomination. I thank Governor Maura Healey and Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll for nominating me, Chief Legal Counsel Paige Scott Reed, and Deputy Legal Counsel Derek Hesselheim for all of your time and discerning interviews. I'd like to thank Administrative Secretary Valerie McCarthy and her staff for their help with logistics, and Joyce, I'm a big fan of Joyce, from the governor, as well as all of those individuals involved in the vetting process leading up to my nomination. I'm also very grateful for the presence and support of Chief Justice John Casey and former Chief Justice Angela Ordonez, both of whom have been incredibly generous with their time and support throughout this process. I thank you. Thank you to my family, including all of those who couldn't be here today, as well as my witnesses, attorneys Corey Carvalho and Raymond Dinsmore, for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I so very much appreciate your time and effort in your words on my behalf today and in being here. And there are many others who have been a part of my journey who deserve thanks and recognition. However, I do want to be respectful of your time. I'm sure it's been a long day. I'd like to share my story with you. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the United States during the 1980s. The sound of guns shooting outside of our home were a frequent occurrence. As a parent now, I can't imagine the fear mine must have felt watching me step foot outside of the house every day. Both of my parents served in the United States Army and worked hard to support our family. My father as a New York City bus driver and my mother at the U.S. Postal Service. In addition to my parents, my brother and I lived with my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and my severely disabled uncle, who were escaping domestic abuse in their previous home in Puerto Rico. While they were unable to support themselves in the U.S., they lived with us. And while this was financially challenging for my parents, I was blessed in many ways by this arrangement. I spent most of my childhood with my grandmothers, so I grew up in a bilingual household and spoke fluent Spanish from a young age. I also benefited from the shared knowledge, experience of 3 generations of women who faced adversities from hurricanes, hunger, and war. I saw them as proud, strong, and brave women whose stories instilled a sense of courage and determination in me at a very young age. But I soon learned that the rest of the world did not see them in the same light. You see, like many young bilingual children, I was a translator for my grandmother who spoke no English at her appointments with various service providers. In this role, I observed the vulnerability that she experienced at the hands of bureaucrats who were too overworked and under-resourced to offer much assistance. Some were cruel in how they treated those who appeared before them for help, and it was in one such situation where I decided that I wanted to become an attorney. I was at an appointment with my grandmother and I was translating the condescending comments from an agency worker to her. I will never forget the feeling of being the messenger in that situation. I was translating these words while my grandmother was looking down at the floor, listening to these words come from the mouth of her 8-year-old granddaughter. I was filled with anger in that moment because I knew that she was embarrassed, but I resolved that I would become an attorney to help people like my grandmother who could not help themselves because of language barriers, poverty, or a variety of other reasons. Also, and more importantly for me, I resolved in that moment that if I were ever in a position of authority over someone else, that I would never make anyone feel the way that my grandmother and I felt on that day. You see, I was taught that everyone has their own challenges and that I should always treat people with respect because you never know what they might be going through. Kindness was seen as a strength in my family, and I developed a strong desire to help those who could not help themselves, and to do so in a manner that affirmed their dignity as a human being. Family is everything to me. My mother is my hero in every sense of the word, and I think that I can live multiple lifetimes before I can match the strength, courage, and tenacity that she has exhibited in her one lifetime. I witnessed the sacrifices that she made, and I credit her sheer stubbornness and steely determination as a big part of why I am here before you today. I am blessed with 2 wonderful sons who are kind young men. They are my light, my joy, and the reason I push myself to be better every day, as well as an amazing partner and a supportive ex-wife. And like many families in the Commonwealth, as much as there has been love, there have been challenges. As children, my brother and I observed the impact of socioeconomic stressors on my parents and the domestic violence that resulted. As a young adult, coming out to my family and friends at a time where insidious stereotypes were pervasive was a daunting experience, with challenges that are still too commonly faced by many in our community. I've experienced the emotions and fears that accompany a divorce, even an amicable divorce like mine. And the fact that I shared these experiences with many of those that I've represented not only helped me better understand their needs, but it made me a more effective and empathic advocate for all of my clients. My legal career has allowed me to work with individuals across the spectrum of our community. First, as a corporate associate at Goulston & Stores here in Boston, representing wealthy families and corporations. My passion for public service soon led me to a position as a staff attorney at Western Mass Legal Services, where I represented low-income survivors of domestic violence in family law cases, and where I was finally able to use my law degree in the service of the disenfranchised, the marginalized, and the most vulnerable in our communities. There, I was involved in some of the most difficult and heart-wrenching cases handled by the probate and family courts, cases with physical abuse, mental health and substance use disorders, and invariably the involvement of the Department of Children and Families. I have represented single fathers, immigrants, grandparents, and those who I knew would never be able to pay a dime towards any legal fees I might charge them. I've represented numerous non-traditional families in protecting their rights to their children and their property at a time where the laws were insufficient to do so. I represented several individuals who were struggling their entire lives, finally be able to affirm their core identity in name change petitions. Probate and Family Court is filled with good people experiencing life's most difficult transitions. Compassion, patience, and empathy are among the greatest strengths I will bring to this position. I recognize how a judge's words and decisions can impact future generations. I have had the children of former clients come to me for assistance, and I have personally observed the cycle of intergenerational trauma present in many families. Judges have an important role to play in recognizing these challenges and in helping to break that cycle, which requires affording all litigants a meaningful opportunity to present their case with respect and with compassion. Honorable counselors, I have walked in the shoes of many of the litigants who come to the probate and family court for help, and I believe that this experience and perspective is both invaluable and necessary on the bench. I have witnessed the effects of racism, poverty, domestic violence, and many of the other challenges the most vulnerable in our society face, and I keenly remember that feeling of helplessness in the face of despair. No child should have to experience such things, and as an attorney, I wanted to bring hope to those without it. I truly believe that a position on the bench is a public trust to be taken seriously and not a laurel to hang onto the end of your legal career. As a judge, I would continue to bring that kindness, respect, and hard work to all of the litigants that appear before me. While my professional experience qualifies me for a position on the bench, it is my personal experience and empathy that will inform my judicial temperament, my understanding, and my commitment to the rule of law and equal justice for all. It would be the honor of a lifetime to be confirmed as an Associate Justice of the Probate Court. I am ready to serve the people of the Commonwealth in this capacity, and it would be a privilege to receive your vote. Thank you so much, counselors and Chairperson Jacobs, for allowing me this time to speak to you about my journey and for your consideration of my nomination. I'm happy to answer any questions you have for me.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Counselor Devaney.
Thank you, counselors. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
You took a long journey to meet me, and I appreciate that. The thing is that, I'm thinking of how the court has changed from, say, 20 years ago, someone being a judge. Much more difficult, you have more complex cases. And you were able to handle them because you've already had so many of those cases. Tell us about your most rewarding case for LGBT with a QIA, if I get that right, individuals. The one that is most, stands out that you always look back on and was such a wonderful outcome that.
Sure. So the case that sticks out in my mind is a case that I handled well over 15 years ago. It involved an individual who was transitioning, who identified as transgender and was in the process of a divorce. The fact that the individual was taking testosterone was used against them to make the allegation that they might be violent with the child. There's no basis for this. And in fact, we provided expert testimony to show that it actually helped with the individual's depression and other symptoms that they were experiencing. And I understood that in order to be an effective advocate for that client in that case, I really had to educate everyone involved. It was the first case involving a transgender individual in Western Massachusetts that I was aware of and that I believe the judge.
So there's no law to go back, there's no law to go back to any, someone goes back 20 years or whatever, you could do that, was it?
Well, the laws as written are gender neutral, but the lack of understanding around what that meant and what role that person had to play in the family, and as well as how the courts would address that, were very complicated. And I think education is the key in that situation, to educate opposing counsel, to educate the court on what the issues are, and what the real issues, right? And at the end of the day, it's about the best interest of the child. And that client, regardless of what they were going through, was a loving, caring, responsible parent. And I had to keep the court's attention on that fact and was able to prevail on the client's behalf.
I'm going to get back to that, but I just wanted, your witness mentioned about the Red Sox and the Yankees, so I have to, I have grandchildren in New York, so they're born there, their father was born there, the Yankee fans. My next daughter was a Red Sox supporter faithful, always, despite the whole family being Yankees. So I want to tell you that. And my son is in Queens, so if you don't think it's hard for him living in Queens.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you something that may make you feel a little better. When my brother and I were young, we would play baseball, and even if it was just the two of them, we played this game where one of us had to be the Yankees and one of us had to be the Red Sox, and I was always the Red Sox. So, piece in my heart for the players on those '80s Red Sox teams.
Well, I told my son, be careful wearing that Red Sox hat. And it's very dangerous. But anyway, no, but I think, I've been here 25 years and everything has changed and transgender and all, it's all also new. And I'm wondering what kind of law rules can you go by because they have been recently established. I have a very close friend, transgendered, probably 35 years ago. And she had boys and they went to school and everything. And I think, amazing what she must have gone through because I don't know anyone in my life except her. And, she's remarkable and she has really done a lot for people because she's walked in their shoes, So, the people that you represented, have you represented more men or more women or children? What is the?
I've been fortunate to represent so many across all the different aspects and those that make up our communities. I will say that at Legal Services, the majority of my clients identified as women, and in private practice, I think that the majority of my clients were actually men. For me, it wasn't about whether you were a woman or a man or a mom or a dad. It was, are you a good parent? Are you a caring parent? And if I'm talking to you in my office and I'm telling you about best interest of the child and you're telling me about what you think your child needs, and if you're listening and receptive to wanting to do right by your child, then I can work with you, because that is my job, is to
I
help
have
you.
to say, I've been here 25 years. I've never had a nominee before me with that experience to know gays and transgenders and all, that they haven't had that experience. So they have to actually learn to be better, and you won't. I think of all the different situations that come before you. You have a gay couple and they have a child and they get divorced. How do you choose who's going to have that child? You're going to have joint custody, or someone's going to, all of those things, that come into play. Have you had any of those
Oh,
situations?
yes, many. And it was a lot more complicated prior to the legalization of same-sex marriage in the Goodrich versus Department of Public Health decision, where these families existed even though the law didn't recognize them, and they were creating families and children. And I helped those families with planning, both in terms of preparing the necessary contracts and advising them on what precautions they needed to take. But then even after, same-sex marriage was legalized, well, that means same-sex divorces are legalized. Again, it was about educating the court on, this isn't about whether it's one woman or two women. This isn't about whether it's a man and a woman. It's about, do we have two loving, caring, responsible parents in front of us? And what is the best arrangement for the child in that situation? It was complicated by the fact that for a long period of time, Massachusetts law and federal law were at odds because of the Defense of Marriage Act. And so there were many years where I assisted families navigate complicated issues regarding their retirement accounts under ERISA, immigration issues where, you could be legally married in the state of Massachusetts, but you weren't allowed to sponsor your partner because of federal law. And so you have to be very creative as an attorney to try to find solutions in a framework like that.
I can't even imagine all the situations that you have a gay married couple. One is the biological mother and they divorce. Does the person who is the biological mother have more rights to that child because she gave birth? Or I can't even imagine being a judge on these things. How do you decide?
So no, the person that is if the parties are married, and the person that is the biological parent does not, because under Massachusetts law, any child born to a married couple is a child of both of those individuals. And so there is no presumption for the biological parent. Although I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I'm sure that that is a tactic that has been used in cases where they tried to use biology as a means to gain an advantage in a custody case. But no, they're both parents of a child have the same, you start from the same place with both parents with respect to what is best for that child.
That's good.
Judge has to understand that.
What, now this is, just because I'm so ignorant about this whole law. What about the biological father, the sperm donor? Do they have any say when any of this comes up before court? If they want any, if they do want to have some relationship with the child, or does that come up at all?
It has. There are many cases that can be complicated by that. In fact, I remember in my career, I handled a case where a child was born to two women. That was the result of an extramarital affair, and the father was recognized on the birth certificate. So if the father is recognized on the birth certificates, there are certain rights that attach to that. And it's complicated. A judge has to navigate those issues, looking at what the law says at the time, but as well as what is in the best interest of the child. In the old days, as I say, people used to sign contracts or try to come up with ways of making sure that that person wasn't involved. But at the end of the day, the law states that a child born within a marriage is the child of those two married individuals and is very protective of that. It would be very difficult to challenge that.
I never heard of what happens with the children who, they have a mother, they have two mothers, and they don't know who the father is. Do they have any legal right to know?
A child is born to two mothers and wants to know. That's going to depend on a lot of things, whether or not how one of the women became pregnant with the child, whether or not there are contracts involved, waivers, disclosures, maybe the sperm donor did not want to be known. But those cases, I'm sure there are still some that find their way into the courts as well.
Well, I volunteered a year in court with juveniles on probation. And I really look back, and I had no idea about governor's council and didn't even know it was in those days. And I look back and I think that was the best experience I ever had because, the other side. I mean, I had 4 children in my own little world, and I had no idea how children live. They have, divorced parents or the mothers. One of them was a teenage girl and her mother was a prostitute, didn't know who the father was, all of those situations. Now, do you get into any of those situations where, a child is, really wants to be separated from the parent, wants to be emancipated?
I've come across some of those cases. I have not represented a child involved in a matter like that, but I have had cases involved where maybe the parents are fighting for custody and the child doesn't want to be with either of them. And that's the point where you look to see again, first, let's investigate, let's find out more about what's going on and maybe appoint a guardian ad litem or an advocate for the child in that matter. And second, you could, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but I think appointment of the guardian ad litem is the first thing that I would do to investigate the matter.
So I did ask you about the most rewarding result of a case, and you mentioned that. So we went over all this for hours, and I really thank you coming the distance. I told you should have brought someone with you. That's a long ride. But
Waffles were worth it.
No, I know, but I'll tell you, I really was so impressed because we need people with your experience to go to the court, and you just can't learn on the bench your life experience, and I can identify with you. I'm a daughter of immigrants, and I know what they went through. That they valued education. My parents were not, my father came from Italy and 12 years old, and parents never sent him to school again. He went to work 9 hours a day, 12-year-old. So he never had education, so I never had that instilled in me. You're very, very lucky. So, you better, and you know what? You don't see it today, to have grandparents and great-grandparents, and to grow up like that. I didn't have grandparents alive when I was born. I just can't even imagine what you learn from them, you know, and to know the languages and everything. I mean, my family, my parents were so prejudiced against that they didn't dare talk Italian. I don't know one word and I feel so bad. They didn't want us to be laughed at. So thank you for bringing up this wonderful person, really. So I can't say enough about you. It was such a pleasure to meet you, and I learned so much because this is a field, really, in the courthouse. And some of your cases will be documented, I'm sure. I'm sure. So I wish you all good luck. I know you'll be wonderful, and I was really proud to have the time to really get to know you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Counselor Duff?
Thank you. Nice to see you.
See you, Counselor.
Being here. I know you, you said you left Golston and Stores because you wanted to do public service. Was that difficult? That's a great, I mean, you were doing really exciting work there. I mean, I know what you're doing is your passion and everything, but was that a hard decision to make? Because I think financially it must have been tremendous.
It was a very difficult decision to make because of the finances. I financed my way through both undergrad and law school with loans, and so I had a tremendous loan debt to repay after I graduated, and Golston afforded me a salary where I could repay those loans. So I figured I would work there for a few years, gain the experience, and then follow my heart. A few months into my position there, however, my law school, Cornell, developed a loan forgiveness program, and I immediately jumped on that opportunity. I applied, I was accepted, and as soon as I got the notice, I gave my notice at Golston and took a $100,000 pay cut, much to my mother's chagrin. I think she was a little...
Same mother.
Had a lot of long conversations. We had a lot of conversations about that move. But I slept so well at night. I was so happy doing that work. That's why I went to law school, and that's the work I wanted to do.
That's great. That's great to hear. In Cornell, I mean, we don't have so many people from Cornell in here.
It's a great school.
Yeah, it's hard to follow your passion. I had a couple of jobs where I made a lot of money for a lot of other people, and I don't even put them on my resume. I forget that I did them. I mean, I just blanked them out because there was no passion in it for me. It was just money. Much to my mother's chagrin, my mother's not with us anymore, but much to well, not to her so much as my father's, is I am not motivated by money at all. And it's really, it's, you know, there's a double-edged sword to that. So your legal journey's been really interesting. And we talked about this, but you went from, you know, you worked with your law partner and everything. And then, you know, you've gone back to UMass. And, you know, it's none of my business whether that's a financial hardship or not, but what motivated you to do that? I mean, I know why they picked you. Seriously, I'm not saying that to be flattering, but I do know why they picked you. But why did you pick them?
It was an exciting opportunity to be involved in an environment where I could not only practice law, but I could be involved in education and mentor undergraduate students. In that position, I was of counsel to the student government associations of both the undergrad and graduate school, and that immersed me in new areas of the law that I got up to speed on quickly, including constitutional law, First Amendment law, and I was able to provide guidance. You know, many members of the student government association are currently in our legislature. They're in Washington, they're in our courts, they're in our state house. And the opportunity to be there at a time in their lives where they're learning, where they're needing guidance about some of the ways to be in this world and some of the important things to think about was an opportunity I couldn't pass up.
Yeah, good for you. And to work, you know, not that this is what you were doing there, but for you to be a leader in our community is very important. Times have changed. They are getting better. They're not perfect, that's for sure. But in the last 10 years, the it's changed some of the mind. Yet for those of us in the community, it's scary. I live in fear. You know, my rights, my wife's rights could be stripped at any moment. And you know, I ain't leaving Massachusetts, that's for sure. But it is something that, most of the community people in the world don't have to think about. You know, what happens, what happens if, my wife isn't able to get my pension or my benefits or something like that. That's really, it's ominous. It's a heavy burden to carry. And unfortunately, so many of us thought we were past that, but we clearly in this country are not. So thank you for your work with that. I do see, and I made a note on your paperwork, and then as I continued to read, you said you did. Would you like to continue teaching?
I would.
The odd course here and there? I'd like you to. Not that I absolutely love to do anything, but I think it's important for people, for attorneys and lawyers, attorneys and lawyers, same thing, but for the judges and again, LGBTQ people to be teaching and to be seen and to be visible. And one of the great ways to do that is teaching. When you mentioned constitutional law, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, an attorney, but that is like the stuff that is just you dream of, like, I read about it. It's exciting. It's more exciting now than it's ever, well, I don't know, maybe Alexander Hamilton thought it was exciting too, but anyway, but thank you for that. You've answered this question very honestly. And again, I said our previous woman who was here, it's very clear and concise. She's also the daughter of immigrants, and I wonder, just sitting here and processing some of it, if that has something to do with it, that your ability to communicate has been heightened because of the speculating, because of the community you've lived in. But you did point out in one of your answers that you've learned how to read verbal and nonverbal communication. That's a skill. We talked a lot about, folks that I'm concerned about, of course, LGBTQ people. Let's talk a little bit about folks with addictions that you're seeing in court. And I would think in probate court, some of those would be very complicated issues because it could be a parent, it could be a child. There aren't many beds for kids. I frankly don't think there are many beds, period. I think a few years ago, it became the du jour issue and everyone was crying and talking about it and banging their fists that we would have more funding for opiate addicts and we would all get through this together and everything like that. And then the moment changed. And, and that was good that it did happen. And I do think a lot of people still have that passion. But from what I see, I'm not sure. I think the stigma has changed, at least for white people. But I don't know how much of some of the other stuff has changed. Do you have experience? Are you willing to share anything about that?
Sure, I do. I've represented many individuals who have struggled with substance use disorders. I remember during the period of the opioid crisis in particular, not that we're out of it, I had several clients who would come to me and the story would always start, I hurt my back on the job. I can't tell you how many stories started that way and what that ultimately led to because of the opiates they were prescribed, eventually to heroin and eventually to the ruin of the family in many respects. And so I do believe, I do have a lot of experience working with clients who have experienced that. I also have experience working with clients who have lost children as a result of their addiction and the lack of support and resources that they had at the moment. One of the things I prioritized in my private practice that I would continue to prioritize always if I'm confirmed is knowing what's out there. I believe it is so important to know the resources available in your community, outside of your community, so that you can connect need to resources. And I think that's one of my skills is connecting need to resources. And in order to know what resources are out there, I have to be out there. I have to be involved in our community and talking to people and educating myself. And I would very much like to continue.
Thank you. That's To me, that's a perfect answer, is because if you're sitting on the bench, I mean, you know, we know we can't arrest people out of this, and sending them to jail is a Band-Aid. It's not. In the numbers of success, I don't know if I've spoken to so many judicial candidates lately, but the probability of you being a heroin addict and coming off heroin successfully for the rest of your life is very low. And it's about 15%. And people don't know that, people don't want to know that. I do have to say, this is the third administration I've worked under, but this is, with Governor Healy, I have, and this is just a personal observation, she hasn't pounded her fist much. She's actually done the work. She actually, as the Attorney General, took the action steps to sue the Sackler family and get funding for this state to actually put her money where her mouth is. And I'm grateful for that. I used to work with heroin addicts. I used to work with addicts, period, but most of them were opiate addicts. And it's very rare to see somebody in this building actually do what she did. Maybe because she was across the street, it was easier to do back then. But I'm very grateful for it. The last thing, you did mention your disabled uncle. And I will speculate, we talked a little bit about that. Recognizing people with special needs, not just physical needs, which are really important because our courts are not yet, from what I understand, up to date in that type of accessibility, which is a whole other ball of wax. It's hard because, the courts are, the judicial system is one branches of government, right? And they get less than 5% of the budget. I don't know what the number is now. It must be like 3.5%. But when you're the judge, and particularly in this court that you're going to, it's not quite, I always call housing court one of Dante's circles of hell. But you're not quite in the inferno, but you're probably in the outer circle. But it's such hard work that you're going to be doing. You clearly have not just a knack for it, but you in the disposition, but the passion for it. It's very admirable. And I thank you for that, because you're clearly someone that could be making a ton of dough doing something. I mean, you were, right? I mean, it's very easy to do. You could be a law professor probably at any of our universities if you wanted to be. And yet you've done this public service path. But having a knowledge of working with people with different types of abilities is important. And and I know from my own life, had grown up with someone with a disability, that there are challenges that people don't understand and they don't know until they've lived with it. And I think that's a blessing that you will bring to the court, having that lived experience, because it's very it's hard to describe to people what it can be. And I can't imagine some of the cases that you would see in court that have to do with those things, and what you said are the things that aren't said, right?
Exactly.
The things that aren't said about an ability or different ability or disability, whatever you want to call it. So my last thing that I do want to say is I am a really big baseball fan. And I'll watch a Little League game. I mean, I
watched the Little League.
I love baseball. To me, it's like quintessential American. But what I really don't understand, okay, you were born in Brooklyn, so I'll give you the pass on not being a Red Sox fan yet, but just I don't want to lie about that.
I can't.
Mets fan. I mean, what you described was actually the play Damn Yankees, right? When you were talking about you and your brother, he gets to be the Yankees and I'm the, you were like talking about something that we've seen on TV on the stage.
Yes.
Anyone doesn't know that, that's right. But why not a Mets fan? I don't know. Want you to be a Mets fan?
I grew up in Brooklyn and in the shadow of Ebbets Field, right? That's where the Brooklyn Dodgers were. And had the Dodgers been around when I was a young one, I likely would have been a Dodgers fan. But unfortunately, California got our Dodgers. So I grew up watching Phil Rizzuto announcing Yankee games on Channel 11. And I don't know if it was his voice or whatever, but it drew me in. I loved baseball. It's It's huge in my family, Puerto Rican communities, big baseball fans, and that's the team I fell in love with. And when I was young, they were terrible. I mean, they won in '78. So I moved to Boston, and I hope you guys win in 2002. So.
That was a very good thing to highlight. But of all of the things you said, though, what I respect the most is your honesty about it, and that you never compromise who you are or what you believe in. So thank you very much. I think you will be a wonderful addition to the bench. I hope that the council concurs that it's the right thing to do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Capel.
Thank you, Counselor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We had a great conversation, and I told you in the middle of it, when you shared some of your stories, I was sold. And we heard it talked about today, just because I found some analogy in my career path as yours. And from a distance, when I squint, sometimes it looks like our system of financing higher education and student loans is a subsidy for the big firms that crush our soul. We give it because we got to pay the money back. Right? Now my firm is wonderful and my partners are great, but so I know they're not watching. And Counselor Jacobs has been talking about you for a long time, and so you came in with a lot of good things. So I'm not going to ask a lot of questions, but I just note I'm becoming a broken record. This administration is giving us nominees who come with tremendous levels of understanding of our communities. In some cases, in many cases, communities that I don't think have been adequately understood, and not necessarily by the fault of the people who are there right now, because as we discussed, culture shifts, and we see those shifts happen in our courts, and especially in our family courts. I was perusing the Commonwealth's Juvenile Justice Policy and Data Board report that just came out. Our court-involved youth in our juvenile courts, 26% identify as LGBTQ. 26% of kids in our juvenile court, 4% more identify as gender nonconforming. And then there's 10% who are either unreported or who are choosing not to report. That's a really disproportionate number, and it's been growing a lot. And I worry a lot about some of the kids I've worked with who've been dealing with family issues, I'll say, because of their identity or orientation. I'm really thrilled to have your voice and the other voices I've seen so far joining our probate family court. You were very gracious to me to speak with retired Judge Luis Perez, who's someone I hold up as a judge who, for Worcester, was in our communities, was leveraging his position on the bench to make incredibly meaningful impact in our community for our children that persists today. And the fact that you took the time to speak with him, and to be frank with you, the fact that he had very high things to say about you after your conversation. I don't know how brief or in-depth it was. I know you're going to talk to him again soon, but just the whole presentation, I'm just really thrilled. I want to thank the administration. I want to thank you for applying. And I want to applaud Counselor Jacobs, because Western Mass is getting some really good nominees. I'm really jealous, but I'm very impressed also. So I'm not going to ask you any questions. I'm sorry that I spoke rather than let you speak, but I'm just really thrilled. I'm really thrilled to be voting yes for you when that comes up. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Councilor Duff.
What a privilege, sorry. I do want to say again, and I think a lot of the first call I got was from Counselor Jacobs. And she's been a great, not just a fan, but an advocate for you. And I think what people don't understand about this whole process in the council, because, we are the only body in the state with absolute veto power over the governor. We say, no, that's it. And so the congeniality of the counselors, the respect counselors have for each other, relationships they have with each other really, really matter. And so when you have a counselor like her who is advocating for you, it goes a long way. So you should be grateful, because she has really done a terrific job on that. And for the record, thank you, Councilor Jacobs.
Councilor Duff for saying that. I really appreciate it so much. Well, okay, so my turn, I guess. First off, your statement was so moving, and it only just builds on the conversations we've already had that, you know, just showed your heart and your character. And I want to talk about the many, 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 many people who reached out on your behalf to echo the same sentiments as well. This is a printout of all the emails I received on a crazy number of emails that possibly are still rolling in right now because they were coming in as early as this morning or as most recently as this morning. And in this stack, there are emails from judges, from opposing counsel, from people who worked with you at UMass. And I do want to read an excerpt from this one letter, and it's a long email, so I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to read bits and pieces of it. But I know it's from someone who would have liked to have come and spoken on your behalf, but I think maybe has a little bit of a fear of public speaking, which I can understand fully. I've had to overcome that myself. So this is from Diane Warren, who was your longtime paralegal and still friend. Skipping to the middle, I was employed by Bernadette Stark Esquire in her private law practice as her senior paralegal from early 2015 through July of 2019, when she closed her practice to become the director of the UMass Student Legal Services Office. I also worked with Attorney Stark at the UMass Student Legal Services Office for 6 weeks prior to the college closing due to the COVID-19 pandemic, at which time I returned to work in our private law office. Skipping ahead, over the years, I have become acquainted with and have had direct contact with many family law attorneys throughout Hampden and Hampshire counties. I have also become familiar with many of the probate and family court justices, both through my own divorce and paternity actions, as well as attending trials with the attorneys with whom I worked. My first criteria in accepting employment with a family law attorney was that I couldn't work with an attorney whom I did not respect and who did not have the respect of her peers as well as the court. Throughout my career, it was important to me that I work with attorneys who were not only knowledgeable, but were honest, cared about their clients, produced a good work product, and achieved fair and reasonable resolutions to their cases. I found all of those qualities in Bernadette Stark Esquire. Attorney Stark was a pleasure to work with. She always came to the office with a good disposition, notwithstanding whatever challenges she faced for the day, both in the office, the courtroom, and in her family life. And she talks a little bit about your family life. Attorney Stark treated me as a valued colleague and was always respectful of my knowledge and experience. She was honest and forthright with her clients, always explaining to them the best and worst case scenarios to ensure they understood the court process and potential outcome in relation to the cost of legal fees. She displayed empathy for her clients despite the fact that family law clients can often take the frustrations of their circumstances out on their counsel and staff. And skipping ahead some more. In short, I believe Bernadette Stark has the knowledge, qualifications, and importantly, the temperament to be a great justice, and believe she would be an asset to the probate and family court. So I'm gonna submit this into record, all of these emails, including that one, and they will be shared with my fellow counselors if they're interested in reading the many, many incredibly enthusiastic words of support that you've received. Add to that, this past Monday night, we held a hearing in Northampton, a local hearing for people to come and give their testimony. And we heard from 9 witnesses who had come out on behalf of you. And then from the public, we had another, I want to say 8 people stand up in support of you. And it was incredibly well attended. There were over 60 people who came out to attend the hearing. And there were judges, there were lawyers, but beyond that, there were students from UMass who came out. There were multiple softball teams. And cheered. At the conclusion of each person's testimony, there was uproarious applause, cheering, and like fist pumps in the air. Which was just amazing. And it was a diverse array of people who came forward, which I think speaks to I've said, like, I believe it and I've said it, our judges matter and representation on the bench matters so much. And you are a representative of so many communities who are so pleased to finally see themselves reflected in your nomination. And we heard that numerous times in the emails that I just submitted, but also in the people who came up and spoke for you, that the LGBTQ community, the softball community, the Puerto Rican but Latinx community and the work that you've done in support, pro bono work and otherwise, with those communities, obviously with the testimony shared was so touching about specific cases that you took on and people that you've helped and whose lives you've impacted. All that to say that the through thread, the common words that were used again and again and again, both in these emails and in the hearing, were your kindness and your empathy and your compassion and your knowledge and your work ethic and on and on and on. The words go on and on. I have been remiss in not yet summing it all up and sending it to council, but I will send you guys a little report on sort of the words that were shared and that we heard. But it was unbelievably enthusiastic support for you and consistent expression of the kind of person that you are. So I will echo what has been said, but I'm incredibly enthusiastic about your nomination and look forward to making the motion to confirm you next week. Before we close, is there anything further that you feel you wanted to share with us about yourself or your?
I am just so grateful to be here again. Thank you all so much. I enjoyed my conversations with every single one of you, to the staff who supported me, to the judges, to my amazing family for travel and witnesses and friends for traveling this way. Just thank you all so much for your time.
Well, that's wonderful. So with that, I will adjourn the hearing for today and thank you to my fellow counselors.